Hey, what's up, students? And welcome to our Wednesday night digital devotional, or digital Devo, if you're word lazy like I am. Our Devo tonight is called "The Struggle is Real," because we are all dealing with very real struggle in our lives right now. And when we deal with struggle always, but we're all kind of dealing with struggles that we can all very much relate to. And I don't know where exactly all of you guys are with our whole shelter in place life right now. But I am very much ready for this to be over and to, do things like go outside on a normal basis and go see movies if movie theaters still exist after all this is done. Go to coffee shops and hang out with people and go to church, obviously. It's a big part of my life. So being stuck at home has kind of been, a bummer for me. And as much as I love my wife and my kids, they're awesome and amazing, and I love them very dearly, and they're the most important people in the world to me. But I would like to see other people from time to time. Be nice when we have that option again. I know most of you feel that way. I also know that a few of you, and you've probably kept this to yourself, are going to miss quarantine. You probably like staying at home and not having to deal with the outside world for the most part. So while the majority of your family may be going nuts, you're just secretly sitting there like, yes, this is how I always wanted it to be, and now it is, and I love it. So your struggle may be going back out after this stay at home and quarantine is over. But regardless of how you feel about this, our quarantine struggle is pretty real, y'all, and it's something that we're all dealing with. And when I think of struggle, excuse me as I scroll my notes, don't want to get lost. When I think of struggle, I think of a lot of different people in the Bible. Like King David had some pretty tremendous struggle. So did Ruth. So did Job. So did Jeremiah, the prophet Isaiah. I think of Peter and Paul and the persecution they faced in the New Testament. But the individual I want to talk about tonight who really faced some tremendous struggle in his life is a dude by the name of Joseph. Now, I know if you've grown up in church, you've heard the story of Joseph over and over and over and over, and a lot of people have probably been like, oh, Joseph, from the pit to the palace. What a great story. And I think while Joseph does go from a pit to a palace, if that's the only thing we get from his story, then we're really missing out on the real meaning and the real spiritual life truth that exists in that story. And when we look at Joseph's story, and just to give a brief synopsis, Joseph's life was pretty full of struggle. Now, in the beginning, it was really good. He was his father's favorite son, and he had 10 older brothers and a couple sisters, and a stepmom, and then a real mom, and a biological mom. Jacob had a couple wives, and he was the only child of Jacob's second wife, and because of that, Jacob really favored Joseph. He was kind of his favorite, He was the youngest at the time too, so that probably made more sense also, But he Jacob loved Joseph so much and favored him so much that one day he decided to buy him a rainbow-colored Gucci coat, and gave it to him in front of the whole family, and Joseph wore it everywhere, which drove his brothers crazy because they just had plain colored Walmart coats, and Jacob made it very obvious that he favored Joseph over all of them. And what was so frustrating to them about this was they had come first and they had worked very, very hard to build up his wealth and his possessions, and they were very loyal to him and very loyal to, their mother and the family and their sisters. And so when Joseph came along and suddenly became the favorite as a little boy, having not really done anything in the family other than just being alive, it kind of got them a little irked, irritated their soul so much to the point that they hated Joseph. And over time, Joseph's stepmom began to kind of hate Joseph. And so the whole family, besides Jacob, would kind of hate on Joseph. And that was just the overlying theme with his family. Well, at one point, Joseph started having dreams, and some of them are pretty cool. And then at one point, he shared a dream where he was like, "Man, I had a dream where like all y'all bow down before me and you like worship me, and like I was an authority over all of you." And his dad was kind of like, "Well, that's ridiculous. Like, are your mom and your other mom and like none of us are gonna bow down to you, man. Sorry, it's not how it works." But his brothers hated him, and so then one day they decided to conspire against him, and they threw him in a cistern or a pit. And they're like, "Well, we don't want to kill him because if we do, then that's on our hands. But if he just dies out here, then we didn't kill him. The elements did." And so they're like, "We're just gonna let him die here." Well, then one brother was like, no, let's not let that happen. Let's sell him into slavery. At least that way he's alive. We'll never have to see him again. So they sold him into slavery, and he got taken to Egypt and was sold by the slave traders to the Egyptian people there. And he got put in jail while he waited to have a master, which, must have been a bummer, I'm guessing. And then he became a slave at this dude named Potiphar's house, and he worked really, really hard there for a good period of time, a couple years at least, and slowly Potiphar really began to trust him because Joseph was a good worker and he was honorable and he told the truth and he wasn't, he wasn't, wasn't shady. And then eventually Joseph becomes like, Potiphar's like main man, like his right hand. Well, while he was doing all that, Potiphar's wife, who had eyes for other people than her husband, began to notice Joseph. The Bible says that Joseph was a fairly good looking dude, and he was doing slave labor, so he was probably super ripped and cut and had like an 8 pack and whatever, and she liked what she saw, and so one day she decided, Joseph, ooh, and she tried to seduce him. Maybe not like that, but probably much better. And Joseph, being a good man, was like, I'm not gonna have sex with a woman I'm not married to. I'm especially not gonna have sex with a woman who's married to my boss. That's kind of not right. And so he ran away from her, like just took off and ran. And she grabbed his cloak and was mad that he took off and ran. And she was super embarrassed because he had rejected her, even though only she knew about that. So in her embarrassment, she went to her husband and was like, "You'll never believe what Joseph did to me. He tried to rape me." And she made all these crazy accusations. And Potiphar, of course, believed her because she's his wife. And he got sent to jail again for no reason. I mean, he didn't. Well, there was a reason, but he didn't do nothing. He did the right thing, and he went to jail again. And while he was in jail, he interpreted the dreams of some people that were there, and he interpreted the dream of a baker and a butler that belonged to Pharaoh, and he put them there because he got mad at them, and that was their punishment. And when the one got to leave, he was like, "Hey man, remember me when you go to Pharaoh that like I shouldn't be here. I need to get out." And Joseph had been there for years at this point. When the butler's like, "Hey man, I got you. Don't worry, I won't forget." He gets out of jail and immediately forgets, and then Joseph is in jail for years longer, just doing nothing but suffering. And then eventually, the butler remembers because Pharaoh's been having some weird dreams no one can interpret, and now Joseph finds himself standing before Pharaoh. He interprets the dream, and Pharaoh's like, "Oh, you're a pretty smart dude, Joseph. Tell you what, I'm gonna make you the commander of the entire Egyptian empire. The only person above you in the chain of command is me. So you're going to be rich and powerful and have all this authority, and you need to do what you got to do to make sure we don't starve to death because of the results of the dreams you interpreted. So, like, take care of us, man. You're the man. Thanks." And so, a couple years later, Joseph's brothers return from, the promised land, the land that God had given them because they're starving to death because of famine. And they come before Joseph. They don't even recognize that he's Joseph. And Joseph realizes in the moment, oh, this is what all my struggle has been for, was so that I can do this thing that God's been wanting me to do. And that's the brief synopsis of the life of Joseph, and there's a whole lot more detail. His story covers multiple long chapters in the book of Genesis. But Joseph knows exactly what it feels like to give pieces of himself away to people only to have those pieces be shattered into tiny pieces or ground into powder by the betrayal of others. Joseph totally understood what that felt like. He understood what it felt like to feel like there are parts of him that were lost forever because of all the betrayal he suffered in his life. I mean, he was betrayed by his family. He was betrayed by his masters. I mean, he was betrayed by, his friends, and he was betrayed by his peers. Everybody that Joseph had met at this point in his life had ended up, betraying him to some degree or another to his great and tremendous struggle and suffering. And I know some of you who are watching this tonight, I know you know what that feels like. I know you feel like your entire life has been a string of betrayals that have just gone from betrayal to betrayal to betrayal, pain to pain to pain, suffering to suffering to suffering, and you find yourself standing in front of the mirror at this point, or looking at your selfie camera on your phone, and you don't really even know who you are anymore, or you don't really even recognize yourself because you feel like so much of you is missing that there's just not really any or much of you left at all. And I said everything in this video to get to this point right here, and I hope you're still listening. This is important. when you feel that broken, and I know that some of you do, when you feel that broken, I want you to realize that there is a God out there who made you, who is a God who is capable of the impossible, who is also a master craftsman. And when you serve that God and when you put your life into that God's hands, He takes those hands, those masterful craftsman hands, and He takes all the broken pieces of you, every single thing that's been given away, every single thing that's been taken, stolen, shattered, ground into dust, or whatever. He takes every single one of those things into His mighty hands, and He uses that outstretched arm of His to keep Satan away so that He can take all of your broken pieces, no matter how small they are, and put them back together again. I want to read to you guys something out of the book of James, and it's James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4, and this is what it says. Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing absolutely nothing. Your struggles in this world will break you down into pieces that you think you're never going to get back. When you put the broken pieces of yourself into God's hands, He builds them back into something that is more suitable for the moment at hand. Think of God like this. As the seasons change around us, God needs to use us in different ways and in different capacities. The only way to take a clay bowl and to shape it into a clay jar is to actually break that clay bowl into a lot of little pieces, grind up all those pieces into powder, then take that powder, which will be a lot of it, and throw it into water, let it sit in the water for a season of time, and then as that powder absorbs the water, it can be then kneaded back into clay, which can then be reshaped into a clay vase or something else. And then after it's been shaped by the master craftsman, it gets put into the fire, which sets the mold of that piece of art, and then it's taken off out of the fire, and then it's finished and made beautiful once again. Every time this world breaks you, God wants to rebuild you into something stronger and more beautiful than it was before it was broken. You can't control what this world gives you. You can't. You can't control the people in this world are going to give you. You cannot control what gets put into your hands. You cannot control what gets taken from you. You cannot control how others try to break you and how they try to make you suffer and struggle. But what you can do, what you can control, is what you do with all of those things. And if you take those things and put them in the hands of God, your brokenness becomes something far stronger and much more beautiful than it was before. So yes, everyone, your struggle is real. It's very, very real. But that struggle is also the same thing that God uses to reshape and to restore your soul after it's been broken. So the next time you face tremendous struggle in life, the next time you feel as if so many parts of you are broken that they can't be put back together, realize and understand that that is an opportunity for great joy, because that is when God wants to put you back together. That's when God wants to reshape you and remold you into something very strong and very beautiful. In this world, you're going to get broken, but you serve a limitless, all-knowing, and all-loving God who can't wait to put you back together again. Love you guys. Hopefully this will all be over soon. We'll get to hang out and have fun in person. And I can't wait to talk about all the things that God's been doing in your lives and all the stuff that He's been challenging with. Don't forget about our Zoom call tomorrow night at 7:30. I can't wait to talk to you guys and play silly games and do stuff like that and whatever. So I love you all. I'll see you soon.